You are listening to KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank, your partner in possible.
Welcome to another 3 Mile Pod. No John Kurtz today. DY and I learned something new about John. It seems like he actually serves on a board of directors of some sorts. As we've done and dug into the evidence a little bit, we think John is on the architectural design committee of Iowa State Athletics, and helping support some of the designs of the bridge and the new indoor tennis facility at Iowa State that also couples as a fast food restaurant or gas station, whatever you want to call it. So no John Kurtz today. He is in some sort of board meeting. We kid about the Iowa State thing, but I don't know what John's up to right now. He's apparently more important than I thought. So DY, I guess you and I got this one, okay?
I'm ready.
All right. Hey, before we get started, I want to talk to you guys about the KCSN annual golf tournament. It's the second annual Tacos and Bourbon golf tournament. It's going to be played on July 29th at Sunflower Hills Golf Course in Bonner Springs, Kansas. There's going to be food and drinks provided at the special thanks to our sponsors, Holladay Distillery, which sponsors our pod. So shout out to Holladay Distillery, 360 Vodka. Also sponsored by Mission Taco, along with prizes, giveaways, a silent auction, and more. Plus, one golfer is going to have a chance to sink a shot for $1 million. So that sounds nice. Maybe we need to get out there, DY, and see if we can sink a shot for $1 million if we're eligible as a part of KCSN. For more information to sign up, click on the link in the description, or for any sponsorship inquiries or additional questions, you can contact Christian Gumminger at kcsnfoundation@gmail.com. Again, that's Christian Gumminger at kcsnfoundation@gmail.com. All right, we're going to do a little news and notes pod for you guys today. We had the the breaking news pod that everybody loves when we have good news to share around the Arthur Kaluma commitment that we ran with on Sunday evening. And now we want to hit on K-State basketball recruiting as well. We're going to touch on football recruiting as K-State has a couple big weekends ahead on the football front as well, with some big-time visitors coming into Manhattan for official visits. But first, on the heels of the Arthur Kaluma commitment, transfer from Creighton, which he'll be eligible here for this 2023-2024 K-State basketball team, we find out just a couple days later that K-State has a top 30 recruit in Darian Reed, 2024 high school recruit, 6'7", 200-pound forward, small forward from the state of Georgia, is now in Manhattan. In fact, probably just concluded his official visit today, DY. Came to Manhattan for the past couple of days on an official visit. And again, this is the number 32 player in the country, according to the On3 consensus, but On3 specifically has him as the number 24 player in the country. Rivals has him ranked number 26. So another big time talent in Manhattan, and seeing if K-State can build on that 2024 recruiting class. But DY, did this come as a bit of a surprise to you that Darian Reed is in Manhattan on an official visit?
No, not necessarily, just because Jimmy Shaw of On3 had the story about a week ago that he was in the process of setting up a visit. So when I started to hear the chatter that Kansas State was about to have an official visitor on campus, I assumed that since I had the intel that it was going to be a 2024 high school basketball recruit, that it was probably Darian Reed. So I think the surprise probably came when Jimmy Shaw released that story a week ago, right? I don't know if we really had Darian Reed on any short list when it came to Kansas State, but certainly we should. He's taken 2 official visits thus far to Mississippi State and Kansas State. I think Georgia is on deck. Now for the number 24 player in the country, everyone's probably like, what, Kansas State, Mississippi State, and Georgia is kind of a weird trio. But look, he's got plenty of other, I guess, noteworthy offers that someone would probably refer to it as well. I think KU's offered, just kind of looking at it. I mean, plenty of, like nearly all the SEC's offered, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee. So I imagine he'll get around a little bit and check out plenty of schools the next month or two. And then we know that he wants to make his college decision before, I think, his senior year. So we don't have to wait too long, just probably a few more months to find a conclusion to this recruitment. Now, Would Kansas State like him to lock it down and just, budge and pop this week and not take any more visits? Absolutely. But at least as of now, no indication that that's going to happen.
I sure would like that commitment just to come. We get a We Got Dudes tweet coming from Jerome Tang and the staff here over the next few days if they've been pretty successful on these official visits with prep recruits. But yeah, to set the stage on him, DY, you mentioned it, offers from KU, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Indiana, Tennessee, Xavier, Florida State, Creighton, you name it. He's got tons of power offers from big-time schools. You mentioned he already visited Mississippi State recently, plans to visit Georgia on June 20th. He's from the state of Georgia, but he did specifically say that location does not matter to him. Here's what he actually says, and tell me if this sounds like somebody that would fit for Jerome Tang in this Kansas State system, DY. First of all, he says location doesn't matter for him. Education is important to him and his family. Wants to study business and entrepreneurship. Here's the quote. I will look at the playing style. I want to play in a structure, but still have a coach that trusts his players and gives them a freedom to make plays. I don't want to be a robot, end quote. Sounds like a Wildcat.
Yeah, I mean, Kansas State would fit that criteria, and there's a few schools.
Yeah.
They are. Yeah. They are.
I know.
Just off the top, now, Florida would make some sense there too. I think so. I think they'll probably perhaps be in the mix. Alabama makes a ton of sense if they prioritize him. I'm not sure, what their pecking order is going to look like. And to be honest, don't sleep on the Bulldogs. I mean, I know Georgia's not necessarily viewed as a basketball school, so to speak, at all, especially with football winning the national championship seemingly every year right now under Kirby Smart. But if there's one thing their new coach Mike White can do, it's recruit.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, no, I would agree with that. And Darian Reed's a guy that's really just blown up on the summer circuit, right? I mean, he averaged 18 points on 57% shooting from the floor and 42% from three. On Nike's EYBL circuit while collecting 6.5 rebounds per game. So this is a guy that's really soared in the recruiting rankings just over the last couple months, really.
Yeah, and he's a poster dunker. I've saw some of the highlights. Hey, he's got some flash to his game, some real explosion with the ball.
Well, not to be lost in this. I mean, the bottom line is this staff, though, just continues to bring top-tier talent to Manhattan. Now, even if they don't land Darian Reed, you're getting a top 30 kid, essentially, to take a visit to Manhattan, an official visit, which you get 5 of in a year. That's significant.
Yeah, well, I think it's more than 5.
Is it 5? Is it more? Okay.
I think it's unlimited was the new rule that went in. But you're right. And just a few weeks ago, everyone was kind of panicking, like what's happening to the Jerome Tang recruiting gears, but they haven't changed one bit. You talk about having the number 24 player in the country on an official visit right now to Manhattan, and then they already have Patrick Ongba on an official visit. I know you wanted to get into him too. He's one of the better centers in the country in that same recruiting class. And now obviously Kansas State already has David Castillo committed as well. I think he's in around a top 50, top 60 type player now since the new rankings came out. And with Gomba, one of the more significant risers up the rankings just based off of the most recent EYBL circuit, when he really blew up as a recruit. Kansas State, credit to them, they knew about him before that blow up happened. They've recruited him longer than anyone. They got really strong ties there to where they're going to compete with the likes of Duke and UConn. And I talk about that really big ratings boost. I mean, especially on 3 and 247. I mean, I think he was hovering around 100 just basically on every single network or recruiting service probably a month or two ago. And now he's number 37 on 3 and number 33 on 247.
Yeah, and the consensus ranking on 3 has him as number 47 in the country and number 5 center nationally. But he'd be higher if for some reason Rivals had a ranking for him. They currently haven't even shown an evaluation for him at Rivals. So, that's interesting. But otherwise, his consensus ranking would be far higher. You mentioned it, DY. So he took an official visit. It was first visit that he'd ever taken as an official. He took it to K-State on September 30th, 2022. He was there for a football weekend in Manhattan. He since visited Providence on an official on May 6th of this year. And then just recently on June 10th, took an official to Duke after he got that offer, and took an official to UConn, the defending national champs, on June 12th. He's from Virginia. He's a 6'10" center, like you mentioned, is completely blown up on the recruiting trail. So we'll see where that goes. But I know you feel very confident, given the relationship with Jareem Dowling, given the relationship this staff has built with him, that K-State is going to be in this thing for the fight until the end. And I don't know, DY, if you want to say what you said in the group text the other night about a prediction on Gongba. I don't know, I'll put you on the spot there. If you want to make a bold prediction on that one.
I mean, if the process ended today, I would pick Kansas State. Now, we'll see how it unfolds, because I think there's a few months left and a lot can happen between now and then. They could lead someone to change their prediction, so I don't want to get caught saying that. But if it was today, I do think it would be Kansas State. It wouldn't stun me at all. But they'll probably need to get him back on campus again. But I think that can happen.
Is there a school though that could change the dynamic? I mean, if UConn and Duke don't move the needle, and he's taking officials there, and K-State's still having to beat them out, I mean, I don't know what school could get in front of them at that point, and in terms of offers, maybe KU.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
and now they've kind of turned up the heat there, so to speak, a little bit, and have ratcheted up their interest level as well. So we'll see what happens. Well,
let's speak in hypotheticals here. So first of all, before we go to hypotheticals, DY, has K-State missed on any prep recruits that they brought in under Jerome Tang?
Sean Phillips, when he picked LSU.
Okay.
It's going. They haven't had a whole bunch visit. They're really selective about who they allow to come to Manhattan.
Cameron Carr. Was Cameron Carr offered officially?
Yeah, I don't even know if he really took an official visit, though.
It was an unofficial, right? Because he was in Manhattan, wasn't he?
Yeah, but I don't even know if that happened. That was kind of a weird one. I don't know if they really were on hot pursuit there before he picked Tennessee. And Julian Phillips never made it to campus. Now, I think it was kind of lessons learned in those first few months and kind of adapting to the new recruiting world. But they don't want to be used as a pawn. So I think sometimes some prospects will tend to do that to certain teams, whether that be from an NIL standpoint or just trying to put the pressure on another program for whatever reason. I don't know. Sometimes these kids, high schools transfers, they can use teams as pawns to achieve a certain mission, whatever that may be. I don't know what they're, truly what they want. And I think Kansas State is pretty savvy about picking up on that. And if they do, they're not going to bring him in on an official visit. So to answer your question, close to 100% hit rate, which is pretty abnormal, obviously. But I think part of that is because of that process.
I only bring it up, and obviously it's almost impossible to continue that type of rate of landing dudes. The Sean Phillips one was kind of in the scramble mode when they came in, but when they've had time to plan out, and not be as big of a rush on these high school visitors they bring in, they land Day-Day Ames, they land Michaela Rich, they get RJ Jones, they land David Castillo. It seems like almost all of the high school guys that they brought in, Gongba hasn't made a decision, obviously. Darian Reed has just now finished his visit to K-State, but they've been very successful with the high school recruits that they bring in on official visits. So I would just say take that maybe as a good sign, K-State fans. And, jumping to a hypothetical, DY. So David Castillo is currently committed to Kansas State in the class. You mentioned it earlier. He suffered a foot injury shortly after committing to K-State, so he hasn't been able to play on the summer circuit due to that injury. And as a result, I think he's dropped a little bit in some of the recruiting services rankings. I know On3 specifically dropped him to the number 66 player in the country, but he's still the number 35 player nationally and the number 4 point guard in the country in the On3 consensus, despite that drop. And the On3 consensus brings into the fold 24/7, ESPN, Rivals, all the other recruiting services analysis of a recruit. So he's still very highly thought of. He's still the 4th best commit in school history, according to the 24/7 Sports all-time commit list that they have for K-State basketball. If K-State were to land, hypothetically, they've got David Castillo in the fold. If they were to get a guy like Darian Reed and then land a guy like Gongba, would it be the best recruiting class in K-State basketball history? Keeping in mind Michael Beasley and that class.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not as much of the Kansas State historian like you, but with Beasley and Walker, they were probably in the same class, I want to say, and both were top 10 recruits. You're probably not touching that one. But other than that,
Yeah, it would be a tough debate. The real thing you would have is you got that third guy in the fold that would be a top 50 commit that class didn't have. But when you look at top tier, Beasley and Walker.
Yeah, but wasn't the third one ended up being Jacob Poland?
Yeah. It turned out. I mean, he wasn't even the top 150. Dominique.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you look back on it, like you have two top 10 guys, and then that guy that basically ended up being be the best player in the Big 12.
Actually, if you look at that class too, so Dominique Sutton was a top 100 guy, and then Jamar Samuels was a guy that reclassified to the class and ended up being a double-digit a game guy. That ended up, he redshirted that first year, but was in that class too. So I think you could say with certainty it would be the second best class. And the reason I bring this up, so if you think about it, David Castillo, fourth best commit in school history, according to the 24/7 all-time commit list that I mentioned earlier. And Day-Day Ames is number 5 currently. RJ Jones, number 7 all-time commit that K-State's got. If K-State were to land Patrick Gongba and Darian Reed, and again, a lot to go here on the recruitment of these guys.
So if they were to do that, just based off what you just said, they'd have 3 of the top 5 commits in school history.
That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's I think it came out to be 5 of the top 9 all-time commits in school history would be on next year's team, assuming nobody leaves.
Yeah, and 3 of the top 6 would be in this class.
Right. So, and these guys have been pretty good at retaining guys. So if they retain the current freshmen on the roster right now and bring in guys like that, it's pretty special to think about what they could be building, and then they're not as reliant on the transfer portal in the years moving ahead, and maybe just need 1 or 2 guys a year from the portal. And I think that's what the staff would really like, is to supplement the roster with a guy or 2 from the transfer portal. So, well, that's it on basketball recruiting. DY, did you have anything else you wanted to add for now?
You got nothing.
All right. We'll take a break here, and then when we come back, we're going to talk about some football recruiting. K-State's got some big-time visitors coming in over the next couple weekends, so we're going to talk about that, get the table set for what's coming. So we'll take a break now, and we'll be back to talk K-State football.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
All right, we're back here to talk some K-State football. Before I jump into that, actually, DY, I don't know if you see it, but I'm sporting my home field apparel, some of my gear from home field. I know a lot of K-State fans are excited, but home field's got a big K-State drop coming on June 17th at 9 a.m. That's this Saturday, 9 a.m. Central. So go to homefieldapparel.com and get some of your K-State apparel from Home Field, which is one of the best in the business when it comes to designing K-State gear. I know K-State had one of the best all-time sales records that Home Field experienced in the first drop they had last summer for the Wildcats. And the drop that they're coming out with 10 items here coming this Saturday is going to be well worth your time to go take a look and make some purchases. So you might want to start setting some money aside and gear up for that Home Field apparel drop that's going to come on this Saturday, June 17th at 9 a.m. So, DY, I want to talk to you about football recruiting, because we've talked about it some. Last year when we did the pod, numerous times in the summer, we had so many football recruiting update pods, right? Talking about Avery Johnson and Dylan Edwards and Jordan Allen and the huge dynamic class in the state of Kansas that the Wildcats brought in. And I feel like this class is kind of going under the radar just a little bit. They've just kind of been going about their business and identifying their targets and landing a lot of those targets that they wanted. But as you look through what's coming down the pipeline, what they've currently got committed, 6 guys that are committed to the program. 5 of the 6 are top 1,000 commits in the On3 consensus, so they're in the top 1,000. There's something to be said about that, certainly. They've landed the guys that they've really targeted. Kyle Rakers is the guy that's not in the top 1,000, and he had 10-plus Power 5 offers, offensive lineman from the state of Iowa. So obviously a guy that was pretty coveted as well. The recruiting class currently ranks 44th in the country. They've dropped a little bit over the past few days as other programs have brought in some commits. But there's a chance it rises back up. And that starts really this weekend, the weekend of June 16th. And I'm not saying there's going to be commitments coming out of this weekend, but the guys they're bringing in over the next 2 weekends are well worth talking about. So this weekend, Grant Bricks, offensive lineman from the state of Iowa, 6'6", 277-pound offensive lineman from Logan, Iowa. The number 82 player in the entire country, according to the On3 consensus. He's ranked as the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the entire nation. He's taking an official visit to K-State this weekend. And DY, I believe this marks his 6th visit to Manhattan since over the past 12 months or so. Is that right?
It's probably close to it. I know he went to the first 2 games last year. I think he was there last summer a couple of times. He was there in the spring. So that would probably equal out to 6. That's why Kansas State is definitely squarely in contention. He continues to, reciprocate that interest quite a bit. And, Oklahoma is giving it quite a whirl, but, they probably outlasted already Nebraska and Notre Dame, leaving it down to those 2. He was at Oklahoma last weekend. So this Kansas State weekend is pretty crucial. They get the last visit as well, probably, unless he takes the visit to Lincoln still, and he might. But I like where the Wildcats are. I'm not saying that they're number 1. They might be, but I mean, it's splitting hairs right now between K-State and Oklahoma.
So offers from Oklahoma, Notre Dame, Nebraska, Penn State, Wisconsin, Oregon, Tennessee, Auburn, Miami, Ole Miss. I could keep going. Is Alabama possibly going to get in the fold with him? I saw a rumored visit for June 21st, possibly. Is that something you think he takes? I don't think they've offered him yet officially, but what are your thoughts?
They're poking around on him. We'll see what happens. They're poking around on him for sure, though.
This could be a case, like you said, though, where K-State developing that relationship before Bricks blew up, because he was a guy that wasn't even in the top 300 in the country, was he, when they identified him a long time ago?
No, I don't think he even had a ranking, and he offered him, and Kansas State was the first to offer him, and it might have been 4 or 5 months later until another school even offered.
Yeah.
So they were the first by far to take a chance on him.
And of note, and look, a lot of this credit goes to your colleague at KSO at On3 and Drew Galloway, as he's pulled together all the visitors lists. So Drew, shout out to you, because I went through and pulled all of that information from your visitor tracker that you've got set up over at On3. So feel free to everyone. I encourage you to go subscribe to On3. DY, why don't you give the sales pitch of why they should go sign up for On3? What's the deal running right now?
It's $1 for... it'll probably be expired by the time everyone listens, but it was $1 for 3 months, or 50% off of your price. But I would still encourage you to sign up. I mean, you're not going to get, better football and basketball recruiting information right now. Nobody's playing games, so it's all recruiting. If you love that, it's a good place to be. And the reason why this football recruiting class is kind of going under the radar, as you have laid out, even though they're hosting one of the best prospects, if they got him to commit, that they've ever landed. But it's got under the radar because so much focus now immediately after the basketball season goes to the transfer portal. And that's a very fun thing to observe, monitor, and follow along with as well. I think we have a basketball transfer portal thread on the board that's 130 pages and has like 900,000 views right now. I'm not even kidding. So fun stuff to follow along with. But the Bricks thing, I don't count Kansas State out. Very winnable recruitment. Like I said, they were the first to offer. I think it was another 3-4 months before a second school even offered. There's a reason why Iowa and Iowa State are not even in the ballpark here. And Kansas State.
Yeah, I would. Go ahead.
Sorry, that took a little staggered there, but it kind of goes back to what has been starting to unfold for the last 12 to 18 months is probably a good way to put it. And that's Chris Kleiman, the head coach himself, putting a stamp on the state of Iowa where he's from, because they've completely gone in there and taken kids that the Hawkeyes and Cyclones wish they would get.
Yep. And Iowa and Iowa State used to be a problem for K-State on the football recruiting trail the past few years. And over the last couple of years, they've really overtaken them and beaten out Iowa State and Iowa numerous times on recruits that it offers. Yeah. Which, by the way, man, the pictures you see of Asa Newsom, that dude looks physically put together to compete from day one.
So he's stacked. He's jacked. That's probably, it's weird to say it because he's probably one of the better recruiting wins of the last decade, but it's probably still an underrated recruiting win. And a lot of them were last year just because Avery Johnson got all the hype.
Yeah. Yeah, Avery got all the hype last year, but as you think about, first of all, Asa Newsome, that was just such a monstrous win on the recruiting trail when you look at who was after him and where K-State came from in that recruitment. But also you think about Grant Brix, and he would be, like you said, one of the maybe top 2 or 3 all-time commits in K-State football history. I mean, Josh Freeman, Avery Johnson, recruiting rankings back in the day when Michael Bishop and all them were here, like it's L. Roberson, they weren't quite as detailed as they are today. But if you look back over the last maybe 15 to 20 years, those would be 2 of the top 3 maybe dudes that K-State could potentially land. So Brix is gigantic recruitment. And Kyle Rakers is an offensive lineman from Iowa that's committed to K-State that moved his official visit up to this weekend to be there when Grant Brix is there.
He and Gus Hawkins will both be there. I mean, yeah, the recruiting rankings back then probably not as accurate or as detailed or even as easily findable, right? As they are now. But I mean, depending on where you look, he's the number 1 interior offensive lineman in the entire country.
Yeah. Yeah, I was shocked when I went back in and looked at that today and saw he's the number 1 interior. And I think K-State would probably like him to play tackle possibly too, right, DY? I mean, he's 6'6".
Yeah, he could probably, we'll see where he ends up. He probably do both. I don't know that you have to say this guy has to be on the interior. I think maybe that's a little bit more natural. I don't know. But obviously he has the skill set and the size to be on the outside if needed.
K-State's been pretty good at having versatile offensive linemen that can play center, guard, or tackle between Cooper Beebe and Cody Whitehair over the years. So I don't think they would. Yeah, Dalton Reisner as well. So they've had versatile offensive linemen that can play all positions. The NFL obviously really likes that. All right.
Well, Dalton Reisner is free agent right now. Still trying to win on.
Yeah, no one signed him. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen there. All right. So Michael Boganowski, Junction City linebacker, number 1 player in the state of Kansas. K-State hadn't landed the number 1 player in the state of Kansas for about 14 or 15 years, going back to when they landed Tanner Wood. Can't remember what recruiting class that was. And then they land Avery Johnson.
So what the 8-man football player? Surprising that he was number 1.
No. He was Conway Springs. So I'm from the land of Rossville, Kansas. So Conway made state all the time, and they were at the 3A level. So I mean, still not huge, but I didn't want you to offend the folks at Conway.
Okay, but he played running back.
He did. Yes. So we lost in sub-state the last couple of years to Silver Lake down Highway 24 and the war on 24. So Conway Springs made it to state.
Conway Springs is going to show up at my door.
Yeah. All right. So anyways, I say that because last year was the first time an Avery Johnson at K-State landed the top player in the state of Kansas in a long, long time. And now here they sit for the second consecutive year, a guy in Michael Boganowski that's really blown up on the recruiting trail from Junction City, 6'2", 195-pound athlete. A lot of people like him at linebacker. Some teams like him as safety. He's got offers from Michigan, Florida State, Oklahoma, Washington, Nebraska, Oklahoma State, Tennessee, Stanford, you name it. He's got offers from all over. And it sounds like this one is going to boil down probably again, just like Grant Brix potentially, to Oklahoma and Kansas State.
Absolutely. That's what I think. He's already visited Stanford and Kansas State, Florida State, and Oklahoma will still get him on campus for visits. I think Oklahoma's probably this weekend and Kansas State's after that. No, I see it being the Wildcats and Sooners. I'll be generic here because I want people to still get the value of a premium membership at KSO, but like you said, this is another Wildcat versus Oklahoma recruiting battle. There's a few of those taking place right now. And it shows just where Chris Kleiman's taking the recruiting profile of Kansas State, where you're locking up with Oklahoma on the recruiting trail at a regular clip, where I'll go back here a little bit. I think it was 5-6 years ago. So not that long ago, there was an offensive lineman commit. I forget his name. I think his last name was Ledbetter. He was committed to Kansas State for 2 days. They really wanted him. They didn't want to lose him. And he flipped to Nevada.
Yeah.
And it wasn't because they were pushing him out. Like he just willingly said, sorry, K-State, I'd rather play for Nevada. Fast forward 5 or 6 years, and you're winning 80% of your commits against other Power 5 schools. You're going up against Oklahoma, who's considered a name for a football program. And that just goes to show where things have gone on the recruiting trail night and day. And, Chris Kleiman has he's been really a godsend at Kansas State. He's really put them back on the map to where they want to be as a program. They just won a Big 12 championship. I don't know that I would pick them to repeat as Big 12 champions, but they'll have a chance because they actually have a pretty kind schedule compared to some of the Big 12 teams, and they still have plenty of talent and a returning starting quarterback, and that's always a pretty good recipe as well. But the basketball is the same thing. Like, we've touched on it. Like, they beat out KU for David Castillo. They're going up against Duke and UConn for Patrick Ongba. They beat out Alabama and Kentucky for Arthur Kaluma. So both sports, the recruiting profile right now is just astronomical.
It's a great time from a recruiting standpoint and on the field and on the court success for K-State basketball and football. Everything is gelling at the perfect time for both sports. You mentioned the Oklahoma battles, DY. Also last year, they beat out Oklahoma for Avery. They beat out Oklahoma for Jordan Allen. We know Brent Venables wanted Jordan Allen pretty bad. And they technically beat out Oklahoma for Dylan Edwards. He didn't choose them. He'd chosen K-State over OU, but then Dylan Edwards ended up going out west to Colorado after flipping from Notre Dame, after flipping from K-State. So, yeah. But hey, at least Dylan Edwards stayed at Colorado so far, so he wasn't part of the purge of the transfers.
He was like one of 10 guys that stayed there. I'm still going to be very curious how that goes. That's obviously a whole different thing, but I'm intrigued by how it will go. I think he says a lot of the right things, Deion Sanders. But I think it's weird to try to form your roster with spring transfers when that's not necessarily talent-rich time. So,
yeah. On the Boganowski front, also DY, just to level set, number 421 player in the country according to the On3 consensus, number 42 linebacker. I think he'll continue to soar up the rankings. When you look at the offers that he has, he's a pretty heavily coveted player. So I won't ask you on the spot to where you would slot him in last year's loaded Kansas class, but I imagine you'd have him probably around the top 5.
Yeah, I really like Boganowski. Now, I think I would have him just off the top of my head. Lynn, who was in the top 5 last year? Avery, Dylan,
Andre Davis, Jordan Allen. Was Andre Davis? Andre Davis was right around 5 or 6.
Yeah. Oof. It's tough, right? Boganowski's number 1 right now in 24, but obviously not a really deep class. On 3, Joe Otting was in the top 5, Jordan Allen, right. Dylan Edwards, Avery. He would be John Randall Jr. also there. I really like Same from Derby that went to Iowa State, to be honest. I think he was actually kind of a late bloomer that I was a fan of. I know some people really like Will Ancia too. Yeah, and then it's tough. Now for me, he'd be behind Avery Johnson, he'd be behind Dylan Edwards, and he'd be behind Joe Otting. Those were my top 3. But he's either right behind Jordan Allen and John Randall. Yeah. Boganowski would probably be right at the edge of the top 5 or just outside.
Yeah. Not bad. All right. Well, we're going to throw to one final break, and then we're going to come back and talk just a little bit more K-State football recruiting. There's a couple more guys we want to hit on and get you guys a scoop on that from DY. So we'll take a break and come back and wrap this pod up.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.
All right, we're back to put a bow on this 3-mall pod as we talk about K-State football and basketball recruiting, get you guys some news and notes of the latest updates and lay of the land there. All right, so we talked about Boganowski and Grant Bricks, obviously 2 of the most heavily recruited players that K-State is after right now on the football front. Another guy I wanted to hit on, DY, Caden Massey out of Linden, Kansas, 6'8", 255-pound offensive tackle that is just completely blown up on the recruiting trail after having some really dynamic performances at various camps. And as a result of that, he has a top 5 and offers from all of these schools of Oklahoma, Nebraska, Ole Miss, Michigan State, and K-State. Sounds like he eliminated KU by all accounts, replaced it with an Ole Miss official visit there. So again, K-State butting heads with Oklahoma. He took an official visit to Ole Miss on June 9th, took one to Nebraska, I believe. If he did take it, the report was he was going to take the Nebraska visit on June 12th. Is taking one to Oklahoma on June 16th, so that's this weekend, and then is coming to K-State for his official visit on June 23rd. And once again, by all accounts, DY, K-State and the Sooners?
Yeah, this one's a little bit trickier to find out. And he's a little bit interesting in how he kind of goes about his business. Not that he does anything wrong on that front. He sticks to himself. Not a whole lot of leaks or hints or clues one way or the other. I will say it hasn't been publicized because I think he kept it off the front pages, so to speak. But I do think he was kind of a K-State fan growing up, and I'm sure that's going to help here. I'll be honest, there is some questions about how hard Oklahoma is pushing. So that might come into play, and obviously that would be a good thing for the Wildcats. You'll take a win anytime you can get it. He's a guy that we, and I think that really all the coaches from each staff that's kind of involved at this point just started to like more and more. He's rapidly improving as an athlete, and that was on full display during this past basketball season, where I think a lot of these coaches that are involved, a lot of these schools that are involved, over those winter months, they can go on all these recruiting trips. There's in-home visits, for the senior classes and the commits that they've already signed, right? But they also can go watch these guys play basketball, wrestle, whatever they do as well. And I think teams really got excited and intrigued when they watched King Massey play basketball. You hear a lot when it comes to it for evaluation purposes, at least I have when you talk to football coaches. A lot of them like their defensive linemen to wrestle because of the understanding of leverage and how that applies. It can translate, and it's just a good sport for a defensive lineman. You hear the same thing when it comes to offensive linemen with basketball, because some of the footwork translates and applies. And you can really see what an offensive lineman can be by the way that he moves and by his footwork in the paint on a basketball court. So I think that's where his stock really started to climb, is because of that. Push comes to shove. To be honest, for all the reasons that I've kind of laid out already, I like where Kansas State sits here with him, probably a little bit more than Bricks and Boganowski, which is a little bit of a shock to me as I'm saying it, just because I also get, and not to freak anyone out, I also get a little bit of a vibe with Massey that you sometimes get with kids that are from the state that a certain program is chasing, right? Where they kind of just, and I know if he leaves, it's to probably a bordering state, right? Nebraska or Oklahoma. So it's not like he's going to experience something completely different. But sometimes, and I think we all probably considered it at one point too when we were in high school, kids just want to get out and go a little bit farther from home, just to leave the state. I get a sense that Massey could fall into that category. So if Kansas State wasn't to get him, I think that's probably the reason why. With that being said, if you had to put a gun to my head and tell me to pick a school, I would pick Kansas State.
All right. No, that would be another huge win. Like you mentioned, DY, a guy that's really blown up on the recruiting trail. And you hit the nail on the head. I was going to say exactly what you did on the footwork with offensive linemen and playing basketball, and then defensive linemen and wrestling because they understand leverage. So you look at some of the better offensive linemen, defensive linemen, those are the skill sets that coincide. I mean, you look at Will Gary, defensive tackle at K-State, phenomenal wrestler. I believe Cooper Beebe. Was Cooper Beebe a wrestler?
I don't think so.
Oh, well. I'm throwing out some
if he was or wasn't, I'll probably hear about it. I should probably know. I can't really remember. I remember that I was, and here's a good story probably for the pod, and people will like this when they hear it. I was bad luck for the Beebe family. So When I went and saw Cooper Beebe, I think it was his junior year of high school. I went out to a Piper football game, and he got hurt, or I think he broke his ankle, something like that, and he never played again that year, I don't think. And then a couple years later, I go and watch Camden play, and the same thing happened. Camden got hurt, and he didn't play the rest of the game. I don't know if he was actually ever out for the year, but I heard it from them too. But each time I went and watch a BB brother play high school, they got hurt. So I'm just a bad luck charm there.
Well, the good news is you've been to a lot of Cooper's college football games, and knock on wood, we've had good fortune there. So
yeah, don't jinx it. Geez.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Let's just keep that going. I'm not even saying the word. I'm not going to go there.
You better be knocking on wood too.
I've got a wooden desk right by me here, and I am actually doing that. I'm pretty superstitious when it comes to that stuff. So we'll see what happens with Caden Massey taking his official visit to K-State on June 23rd.
He is a man.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, eight man. Shout out to the Linden Tigers, man. I think they have a basketball court in one of their gyms that's carpet. I played on, got some rug burns on it growing up. And shout out to Linden too, because I spent a lot of time camping with my parents and brother out at Melbourne Lake, which is 7 miles. And we'd go 7 miles from Linden. We'd go into Linden all the time to get some groceries and eat. So there you go, DY, some fun little Kansas history of Cole Manbeck's life growing up.
You should give one of those like nuggets, like every podcast about some random place in Kansas.
I could probably do it for you. So just one other one to hit on the football front, and we'll go brief on this one, DY, but Caleb Redd, he's 6'4", 220-pound defensive end from St. Louis, officially visiting Manhattan, I believe, if things still stand, on June 23rd. And once again, who's the team they're going up against? Sounds like Oklahoma is an offer, and they're going up against him. It sounds like Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kentucky. He's got an Oregon offer too, reportedly. D-end, but he's taking a visit to K-State on June 23rd. So would you say he's kind of the top target at D-end for K-State, or is it Joseph Anderson as well, another guy they're going after?
Those two. And you'd like to see Kansas State be fortunate with at least one of them, because it kind of happens this way. It's not necessarily because Kansas State is weak recruiters. I think Buddy Wyatt's one of the better recruiters, but defensive line, everybody wants defensive line every year, a premium position, and they're hard to get. Kansas State, especially the ones that are kind of ranked well, because even the ones that are ranked moderately well still have a ton of offers and a bunch of schools after them. We're talking about Caleb Redd, who's a 3-star, right? Mid 3-star, high 3-star in that ballpark, in that neighborhood. And again, he still has Oklahoma, Nebraska, Kentucky, and Oregon offer him. So it's tough to land defensive lineman. I mean, that's why Kansas State's had to make a living with basically a legacy, like a name Matt Lack, turning a walk-on to a defensive lineman and Brendan Mott, and then just a developmental guy in Felix Anudike-Uzomah. It's a hard position to grab, so you'd feel very fortunate if you could get one of them early, just because you're probably haven't made significant or considerable progress with many, just because of the challenge that position provides. Corner is kind of the same way now. Corner is a really premium position when it comes to football recruiting as well. And so, but I would consider especially since, and I know it's been reported already, Wyatt Gilmert's not going to visit K-State. He was the DN out of Minnesota. So I think it'll be Joseph Anderson. It'll be Caleb Redd. I actually think the stiffest competition for Redd, since I know you opened it up talking specifically about him, is probably Kentucky. It's what it sounds like.
Okay. I was just going to say, DY, another common denominator that we see on a lot of these recruits is Nebraska. And you mentioned Iowa and Iowa State on the recruiting trail. And I used to see Nebraska pop up the last few years until really last year, and just think, K-State's not, they can't out-recruit for Nebraska. They've always struggled to beat them on the recruiting trail the last 7-8 years. I don't even blink when I see a Nebraska offer anymore. I mean, K-State has beaten out Nebraska almost as much as Iowa and Iowa State on a lot of these kids.
Yeah. Some of that was also because one is a little bit of a transition. Sometimes you got to really get your feet on the ground a little bit, especially when you're not really from the region, to really get going. I mean, Chris Kleiman was from the region. It took him a little bit to really get going recruiting-wise at Kansas State. It's that transition. I mean, you got to be talking to kids for 2 or 3 years if you're going to get them. In most cases, you really do. And that's why Kansas State's really are running on the ground at the moment. But if you're somewhere at Nebraska when you're a little bit more resource rich, maybe you can shrink that time a little bit. What I will say is what I do expect going forward. I think when you had Scott Frost and even the Nebraska coaches before him, those guys, they won recruiting battles when they faced Kansas State, except at the end of the Frost era because everyone knew that was a lame duck situation, and that's why Kansas State really started to beat Nebraska on the recruiting trail. But Nebraska kids, they're going after a kid from Nebraska. They're probably going to get them, at least if they're facing K-State. I think we've seen that play out quite a bit too. Just in general, they kind of got away with some of the regional recruiting just because their eyes get big and they say they're Nebraska. They're going to go get, look at the rankings and they're going to go through it. Matt Rule doesn't do that. So I think if we're going to bring this back to K-State and not just Nebraska, I think they'll collide with Nebraska probably more often because I think Matt Rule is a guy that will value blue-collar football much the same way as Chris Kleiman does.
Yeah. I mean, I think of a guy like Keegan Johnson, too, from Nebraska, right? And his dad played at Nebraska, too, correct? And K-State was able to get him. Look, we'll see if under Matt Rule, Nebraska continues to be a K-State farm system of providing.
I will say this, too, with Matt Rule. I think he was a failed experiment big time in the NFL. He was a disaster with the Carolina Panthers, but he won big at Temple. He won big at Baylor. And to be honest, out of the last few Baylor coaches, he recruited the worst. Yeah. And he still won the most. So Matt Rule isn't going to look at recruiting rankings and just be a recruiting, dominator. That's not necessarily his thing. He kind of recruits for fit and culture quite a bit.
Yeah. Oh. All good stuff, DY. Hey, let's to put a bow on this, and we'll go full circle here and go right back to K-State basketball. One thing I wanted to mention, circling back to the Arthur Kaluma commitment, was just a huge transfer K-State basketball. I tweeted this out, but for people that don't follow me on Twitter or not on Twitter, I pulled something from Brian Kilobrowski for the win of USA Today, and he used advanced analytics to pull together a composite list of best transfers in the transfer portal, entire portal, this offseason. Hunter Dickinson was number one, but essentially what he did is he took evanmaya.com as well as Cerebro Sports and Bart Torvik, so a bunch of different advanced analytics, and he came out with Arthur Kaluma as the number 5 overall transfer in the entire portal all offseason, and then had Tyler Perry, K-State transfer, as the number 8 player in the entire portal. So 2 top 10 transfer targets. So shout out to Jayhawk Takeover, who wanted to climb up in my mentions and say that, they were not top 20 transfers. Look, we know that transfer rankings are kind of all over the place, as you've said before, DY, but wanted to point that out. And Kaluma was the highest ranked recruit in the Greg McDermott era at Creighton as the number 50 player in the country. So a top 50 recruit coming out of high school. And one thing I think was interesting on him, DY, and we'll finish with this, as I went back through like the NBA prospect draft rankings after this freshman year at Creighton, you'd find numerous sites that had him as a first round pick. In fact, Sam Vecini of The Athletic had him as the number 15 prospect in the 2023 NBA draft after his freshman year at Creighton. Sports Illustrated had him as the number 18 player. I think Bleacher Report had him like number 42, but he's an NBA guy. So if he can develop and take that next step, I mean, we could be talking about a couple guys in the NBA draft next year from K-State on the heels of Keontae Johnson and hopefully Marquise Noel. Love that for him.
No, I mean, I said it before. I don't know if I wrote it or if I said it on our last podcast. I think Kansas State can start talking about a Big 12 title contender again.
Yep, definitely. All right. Well, shout out to DY for all the great recruiting information. Shout out to our sponsors, Holladay Distillery, 360 Vodka. Again, sign up for that KCSN golf tournament, Tacos and Bourbon. It'll be a great time on July 29th. Get out there, have some fun, and have a chance to win $1 million. So thanks to DY for all the great information, recruiting information, as we set the table for what should hopefully be an exciting upcoming few weeks and really an exciting football and basketball season. So thank you to 360 Vodka, Holladay Distillery for all their support. Great K-State folks who support us. For Derek Young, I'm Cole Manbeck. Thanks for listening to another 3-Mile Pod.
Thanks for watching this production of KC Sports Network, the fastest growing sports media network in Kansas City. Check out these videos that feature our team of more than 15 former players, insiders, and analysts bringing you the best Chiefs coverage you can find. Entertain, educate, inform. KC Sports Network.